So it took me like 7-ish years to pass N1. And I think I could have done it probably in 4, maybe 3, because I was studying a lot per day. But yeah, a lot of mistakes. And I will share them with you. So here, how not to learn Japanese like I did. In the very beginning, I didn't use any kind of flashcards, so I was just forgetting just about everything I learned. Then my first time in Japan, I got these paper flashcards, these tango kado. It's like a key ring with paper flashcards on it, and I was pretty excited about that, and so I started making flashcards with those. I would write Japanese words on one side of the card, and then I'd write the English. Oh, I was writing just in hiragana because there's too much work to write in kanji. And then on the back, I was writing the English, and then I'd study them, Japanese to English, and then I'd flip them, and I'd do the whole deck, English to Japanese. And I had maybe 2,000 of those cards, and I think one pack was like 100 cards. I had like 20 of them filled out. Since I didn't write the words in kanji, I wasn't becoming able to recognize them out in the real world. I wasn't learning to read very well. Since I was doing one word only on the flashcards, I wasn't learning them in sentences, so I didn't know how people actually used them. And since I didn't have the context in which those sentences would appear, I didn't know what was natural or what a person would say or write in a situation, because Japanese is a very high context language, and you need to know the context if you want to have natural Japanese. You can't just pull a sentence out of a textbook and then go say it to your girlfriend. You're probably going to sound unnatural about 90% of the time if you do that. I don't know why people don't tell you this. The reason I shouldn't have studied my flashcards from English to Japanese is because this is a really inefficient way to improve your recall. I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking the same thing that I thought at that time. I should put English on the front and Japanese on the back, because then it'll teach me to think of that word when I'm trying to speak Japanese, or I will be able to recall it better, because it's more difficult to recall a Japanese word than it is to recall the English meaning of that word. And I get the thought process that goes into that. But you can learn words faster if you do Japanese on the front, English on the back. And if you're learning those words in context, you'll also learn how the Japanese is used. And once you get to a certain level, that English is going to disappear. You're not going to need it anymore. And if you're trying to speak and get better at speaking, you need to have a thought, an idea, and something you want to express in words, and then try to put that into Japanese. And that is the, mechanics that go on in your brain. It's very different than just recall. Trust me if you want or not, because we'll get to that later. Anyway, I managed a slight upgrade from my paper flashcards when I discovered Anki, which is an SRS, a spaced repetition system. It's basically like a smart flashcard system. It'll show you a flashcard when you're likely to forget it based on some algorithm. Switching to this when I had, a couple thousand paper flashcards was pretty great. SRS can be helpful, and people get really worked up talking about them online. I think you don't want to over-rely on them, which I did, because you end up in flashcard hell and you get all these review avalanches, and you're very likely to burn out. And then also there's a tendency to just learn in a vacuum with just flashcards and nothing else, which I also did, so careful. Aside from the use of flashcards, the main issue was that what I was studying, I was making kanji my main focus, because I was so stressed about learning kanji that I thought, I'm going to focus on kanji and learn kanji. It's like, if I had an hour to learn Japanese, I'll spend 45 minutes studying kanji and 15 minutes thinking about kanji. I don't know, I was obsessed with kanji because I was very scared that I'd never be able to learn them, and that also is not great. Because if I wanted to learn kanji, I could just learn words that have kanji in them and learn to read things in contexts. And then, that's how I ended up learning kanji anyway, but we'll get to that. I did all the things. I tried writing kanji in those workbooks where you just write it over and over and over again, 100 times per character, and that really didn't work. And then I switched to Haisig, remembering the kanji. It's that book where you take kanji and you split it into parts and you make a mnemonic. The one I always remember is that turkeys on a tree is gather, because there's like a bunch of turkeys in a tree. And I don't remember that because I had a mnemonic for it at the time I was studying. I remember it because I mentioned it in an article when I was talking about this method of learning Japanese. So I did Haisig for maybe like 6 months, maybe even like a year, because I sort of went back and forth on it. And at the end of that time, I finally got so frustrated with Japanese. And this is about 2 years after I started. And I had gone to Japan, studied abroad for 6 months. I had taken maybe a year of Japanese at a college, which is kind of a waste of time. Studied like crazy on my own, doing Haisig and stuff like that. And I just thought, this is not working. And I quit Japanese completely for about 2 years. After that 2 years, I came back and I had a feverish 3 months when I went through Haisig again, but this time I used Anki and some other tools. And I got through all the kanji meanings in about 3 months. And I sort of learned kanji that way. I say sort of because I just forgot all my mnemonics very, very soon after that. But the key win here was that I thought I learned all the kanji, and so I got very much less stressed about learning them. And then I was finally able to have the headspace to just go and focus on learning, lots of Japanese that people use. In short, I was able to quiet a little bit that voice that constant nagging voice in my head that just was telling me that I was stupid to even try to learn Japanese, because I was never going to get to the level that I wanted to get. So after all that, I started directing my attention toward learning new vocab and words, and I was making lots of Anki flashcards. And this is how I actually learned kanji, because I started to read it a lot in sentences. But, even here, I made the mistake of using really bad sentences. I especially had bad sentences I was pulling from like English to Japanese dictionaries. Some of them are really weird. Then a little bit after this, based on some advice I read online, I decided I'm going to switch to Japanese only. I'm going to do Japanese to Japanese flashcards. And I'm only going to look up words in the Japanese dictionary. And I'm going to make my flashcards Japanese on the front, Japanese on the back. I have a target word. I look it up in the dictionary. And then I put a sentence that I go find online on my flashcard. And on the back, I'll just put the definition of that Japanese. Great, sort of. Since I was doing Japanese only flashcards, there's no English on there. It made me worse at translating. I realized that once I started to want to translate professionally, I was missing a lot of knowledge of like, what would I say for that in English? The simple thing would have been to just lean on my very good knowledge of English to learn Japanese. And then you could go to the Japanese dictionary and just check how they describe it to add a bit of nuance and clarification if needed. Like a lot of times you don't even need that. Of all the mistakes I just mentioned, the worst two, by far, are one, quitting. Obviously, if you quit, you're not going to learn anything. And two, just that voice in my head, the constant doubt, self-sabotage, the nagging voice in my head just saying, you're not going to learn. Those were my two biggest mistakes, just letting that voice really rule a lot of my thought process for a lot of my journey of learning Japanese. And it didn't help at all. It just made things worse. If I show up at a cafe and study for a few hours a day, obviously I'm going to learn Japanese eventually, even if my study methods are very inefficient. But I really just didn't believe it would happen. And please don't be too hard on yourself. I don't actually regret doing a lot of the mistakes I mentioned in this video because some of them were things that I enjoyed doing, like those paper flashcards. It's kind of ridiculous to have 2,000 little paper flashcards on keyrings, but I loved those flashcards. I loved flipping through them and feeling like, wow, it's got like the paper and it just felt good in my pocket. I'm walking around. I loved it. I mean, yeah, I could have learned Japanese much faster than I did, but I mean, whatever. I'm just having a good time. And I hope you are too, regardless of your level. I could have been having a much better time learning Japanese from the beginning up until I got good or fluent or whatever you want to call it. I was a little too hard on myself. Just if you put in the time, even if you're inefficient in your study method, you'll learn it. Just have some faith. Good luck and thank you for watching this. So I don't want to make any videos that don't teach Japanese. So check out this shirt I made. It's got one of those tango kado on it. It says tanoshimu koto. Tanoshimu means like to enjoy oneself, and then koto just makes that into a noun. So when I first showed it to Rei, she said, mere? Like, is that a command? And the reason she asked that is because you can put kotoda or koto on the end of a phrase to make it a command. We have a lesson on this in NativShark, telling others what not to do with kotoda. Both viru, vinai, kotoda, and viru, vinai. Monoda can be used when telling someone what they should or should not do. So for example, an article about language learning.
上達したかったら、とにかくその言語に触れることです。
上達したかったら、とにかくその言語に触れることです。
触れることです at the end, like that's a command to someone to do something. And I kind of did think of it as a command when I put tanoshimu koto on this shirt right here. I don't think a native speaker would necessarily know that that's what that's supposed to mean. You could also think of it as, like, if I type tanoshimu koto into Google and look for images, you get results like 効率ばっかりでなく、楽しむことを忘れるな. Don't just worry about being efficient. You also shouldn't forget to enjoy yourself. 忘れるな. It's like, don't forget command form. So I'm kind of thinking of it like that also. So I don't want to forget to enjoy my studies like I enjoyed my tango kado. That's why I put tanoshimu koto on it. So just a little reminder for myself and hopefully one for you too. 楽しんでたくさん勉強してください. Okay, see ya.
この番組はフューチャーラーニングメソッドネイティブシャークがお送りしました。